Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to do a rifle cartridge review on one of my personal favorites, possibly my favorite of all time, the 6.5-284 Norma. So for the past 15 years or so, the 6.5 millimeter cartridges have become extremely popular in North America. They've been popular in the rest of the world for a long time, but they have become very popular. The 6.5 Creedmoor and the 6.5 PRC specifically. But there's a 6.5 from years ago that's always been pretty impressive to me. So the 6.5-284 Norma was standardized by Norma in 1999. However, it had been used as a wildcat going back to the 60s, and it was known as the 6.5-284 Winchester. Now, its parent case, which would probably be obvious, is the 284 Winchester. So in 1963, Winchester came up with a brand new case. The 284 does not have a parent. Okay? I'm sure it got inspiration from some other cases, but it was a brand new conceptual design and a brand new case. The point of the original 284 Winchester was to be very similar in performance to the 270 Winchester and the 280 Remington. This new 284 Winchester case would fit into a short action, and they had two rifles that they wanted to put it in. They wanted to put it in the Model 100 automatic, which is a Winchester, and the Model 88 lever action Winchester. The performance they were looking to get was similar, like I said, to the 270 and the 280. The 280 was standardized in 1957 by Remington, and of course the 270 was standardized in 1925 in the Model 1954 Winchester, which was a precursor to the Model 70. If they could get that same performance out of the bigger 30-06 case, which is the parent of the 270 and the 280, in a little bit smaller package, then they would be doing their jobs. They'd get that awesome performance, but in a short action, in their lever action and their automatic rifles. Even though the 284 got close because it was a shorter, fatter case that could hold pretty much the same amount of powder, it just didn't quite meet the same performance as the 270 and 280, mainly because of that short action. In fact, if you seat the bullet out further, which gives you more case capacity, and you do fill that case to capacity, it will match those other calibers, those other cartridges. And so the only flaw is that really a 284 is better suited for an intermediate length cartridge action or a long action or standard action. But when you cram it into a short action, it's still a cool round, but it doesn't quite meet those goals. Now, very shortly after the 284 was released, long-range shooters realized the potential of the round. And they kind of liked the thought of necking it down to 6.5 caliber and seating out that bullet pretty far, getting high BC heavyweight bullets in the 140 class, and putting it in an intermediate or long action rifle, custom rifle, and using it for 1,000-yard competition shoots. And it became a very popular custom rifle chambering, especially for long range competition. In the last 3 or 4 decades, it has become a decent hunting cartridge. One of my favorite YouTube videos of all time is the Gunworks Africa YouTube video where they're shooting a custom 6.5-284. Pretty cool video. But it's always done good in intermediate or long action rifles. Now this is a Mauser 98. It's obviously a custom. It's nothing spectacular. Just did what I could do slowly over the years. I did put a 10mm trigger on it. It has a Hogue overmolded stock. Of course, I had to have a gunsmith put a different safety on it, drill it and tap it for a scope, put a different bolt handle on it so it could house a scope. And this is a Optica 6 scope. Works really well for long range. The barrel I put on this action is a Douglas air gauged barrel. It's 26 inches. It does have a 1 in 8 twist, which back when I had this gun built, they kind of wanted to argue with me and they said, "Oh no, you want a 1 in 9, right?" And I said, "No, 1 in 8, 1 in 8," because I knew I wanted to shoot the 140 grain bullets. Now, in today's market, that seems crazy because all your 6.5s come out in 1 in 8, like the 6.5 Creedmoor, to shoot those higher BC bullets. But this Mauser action, the Mauser 98 action, is kind of an intermediate length action. So it's longer than a shorter than a standard or a long action. So it's just about the perfect size for a 284 or a 6.5-284. I have had good success with this rifle, by the way. So the 6.5-284 had a lot of success at long range shooting. In fact, at one time it had the world record for tightest group at 1,000 yards. That has been beaten since, but it was very successful in the long range game. Here is the case of the 284, and that is a 140 grain Berger VLD. I knew I wanted to go with this loading, the Berger's 140 grain VLD, H4350 powder, Federal 210 match grade primers, and Lapua brass. I knew that's a loading I wanted to go with before I ever even built this rifle. So as soon as I started to reload for this and test out different powder combinations and all that, I immediately got good accuracy. I think the bullet, the case, and inherently the cartridge itself is very accurate. And I think that my gunsmith done a great job on the rifle. So it was always accurate. I never had a problem with accuracy, but I was not getting the velocity I was expecting. The actual first loading I ever shot through this was these hot core spear bullets. These are 120 grain using reloader 22. That was a pretty fast load. It was around, I think, 3150 on the feet per second. Killed a deer with it, and all in all, I did like it. But I was going more for a long range setup. I had rifles for deer hunting up close, but I wanted a more long range deer rifle. But when I went to this 140 grain, I did not get the velocity that I wanted. However, even though I was basically at max, according to the book, there was no signs of pressure at all on the primer, on anything like that. So I just continually, incrementally built it up until I finally did get to about 2,900 feet per second with this 26-inch barrel. And I did actually have to pull it back a slight bit because I did actually start to see a little bit of signs of pressure. Pulled it back a slight bit, ended up around 2,900 feet per second, maybe slightly under. Shot it 300 yards, and it was extremely accurate. It had a very tight group, about the size of a $50 at 300 yards. So, been very impressed with it, and it had shot very well. Unfortunately, the way life is, I just have not had a ton of time to shoot it. I've probably only got 100 rounds in it total. I did break it in really slowly, probably overdid it, shot one bullet, cleaned it, another bullet, cleaned it, did that 20 times to break it in. Like I said, shot some 120 grain spear hot cores, and then I've shot these Berger's bullets and got it to shooting really good, and that's pretty much all I've done. But I have a lot of plans with it. I still have some of the 140 grain VLDs. I also have some 143 grain Hornady ELDXs. And I also have some Nosler 140 grain partitions. So lots of stuff on the reloading front that I want to do with the rifle. I just haven't had the chance to get it done. So where does the 6.5-284 compare to other 6.5s? It's very close, I would say, in performance to the 6.5 PRC. It's not going to have quite the velocity of the 6.5 PRC or something like a 264 Winchester. Definitely not like a 26 Nosler. But it will have a substantial amount more velocity than, say, a 6.5 Creedmoor or a 260 or a 6.5 Swede. So it's just kind of right in that sweet spot. Pros and cons. So let's start with the cons. The big con, well, there's two. Number one, it's just not common. They do have some factory ammunition available, and you can't find it right now with this ammo shortage going on. But even when you can find it, it's pretty expensive. So if you don't hand load, 6.5-284 is really not the way to go. It's just not common. The only factory rifle that chambers in it that I know of that's not expensive is the Savage. Savage does bring out their 110 in 6.5-284. And I know that Christian Arms and some more high-end rifles will chamber it, but I don't know of any other, lower budget rifle company that will, except for Savage. So it's just not common. You're going to have to hand load for it. And then the other downside, the other con, is its barrel life is not the greatest. Its barrel life, once again, probably very similar to a 6.5 PRC, maybe slightly better than a 6.5 PRC, but definitely not as good as the Swede, the Creedmoor, or the 260. So it doesn't have the greatest barrel life, but it's really, really a good cartridge. So what are some of the pros? So let me put it to you like this. If you like the Creedmoor, if you like the accuracy, the inherent accuracy of the Creedmoor, then you're going to like the 6.5-284 because it's just as accurate, possibly more so. Once again, it held the world record of all cartridges at one time for the tightest group at 1,000 yards. If you think that a 260 or a 6.5 Creedmoor or a 6.5 Swede is a good hunting round for, whitetail deer and antelope and things like that, if you think that, well, then obviously the 6.5-284 is going to be even better because it's a step up. It's going to have more velocity and more energy. And of course, we know that in Scandinavia they've been hunting moose and large game for 100 years with the 6.5 Swede. So it's definitely capable, but I would say more capable than a lot of your 6.5 Creedmoor type cartridges. It has more velocity, more energy. So in all honesty, it's very similar to the 6.5 PRC. It's just like a 6.5 Creedmoor on steroids. Now the only problem is, once again, barrel life's about the same as the 6.5 PRC, but it's just kind of an obscure cartridge. So if a person asked me today, what should I go with, 6.5-284 or 6.5 PRC? I would tell them that my favorite of those two is definitely the 6.5-284. But I would have to recommend they buy a 6.5 PRC if they were looking for something similar, especially for hunting purposes, because of the availability and the popularity of the chambering in 2022. I do hope that the 6.5-284 continues to be chambered in other rifles, because it's definitely an awesome cartridge. If you're looking to get a 6.5-284, make sure the barrel is 1 in 8. Especially if you're building a custom rifle, make sure it's a 1 in 8 so it can shoot those 140 to 145 grain bullets. The barrel length is not that big of a deal, but I would say at least 24 inches. You're kind of defeating the purpose if you're going down to 22 inches. I have a 26-inch barrel to get just a little bit more velocity out of it, but the 24 would also be okay. Now, if you're shooting at long-range competition, if you're literally thinking about getting into long-range competition and you're going to go with a 6.5-284, even though it's not as popular as it used to be, you're obviously probably going to get a longer barrel, like a 30-inch barrel. But for just general use, for a combination of long-range hunting and long-range target shooting, 24 to 26-inch barrel is just about right. Now, I know if you buy a Savage 110, it's a long action, which is just fine. That'll give you plenty of room in the chamber and in the magazine to seat your longer, heavyweight, high BC bullets out. So, but if you do build a custom rifle, make sure you have at least an intermediate size action, like the Mauser action. If not, if you can't find one of those, just go with the long action, because you don't want to have a short action and have to push that bullet so far into the case. It's going to kind of defeat the purpose. Once again, I consider the 6.5-284 a lot like the 6.5 Creedmoor, just better in every way. And then it's very similar to the 6.5 PRC, but it's just not as popular. if you're like me and you're a big fan of this case and you want something a little bit different, I think it's a really, really cool cartridge. If you're somebody watching this and you're just getting into rifle cartridges and long range shooting or hunting, and you're trying to figure out what you should go with, and you don't have any reloading presses or components, and you don't really want to do that, you just want to buy factory, I'm reluctantly going to have to tell you, probably, at least right now, stay away from the 6.5-284. It's more of a hand loader's cartridge. It's more of a long range competition shooter's cartridge. It can be a great hunting cartridge as well, but it's not common. You're not going to find factory ammunition, and if you do, it's going to be expensive. You're probably better off to go with the 6.5 Creedmoor or the 6.5 PRC. But on the cool factor, this is where it's at. This is the cool 6.5 in my opinion. So this is a child of the 284 Winchester. A couple other notable cartridges that was spawned from the parent case of the 284 Winchester was the 450 Bushmaster. Also the 6.5 Weatherby RPM, which is just this case but lengthened. And then recently we have the 338 Weatherby RPM. All those came from the 284. And all those will have the rebated rim, which that's something I didn't really talk about, but I believe the 284 Winchester was the first cartridge ever to have a rebated rim. So the head of this is a 0.473 head diameter. That's the same as everything from your 22-250 to your 30-06. Almost all of that's going to have a similar head diameter. Only exceptions being any kind of short magnum or any kind of like your short action ultra magnums, your Winchester short magnums. They're going to have a little bit bigger head. And also your 6.5 Sweet has a slightly bigger head. But almost all, excluding magnums, of your modern day centerfire rifle cartridges that it's common and that we use today come from that 473 head diameter. And this is a shorter, fatter case, like I said. And so they actually have a smaller head than what the body of the case is. So the body of the case is actually fatter than what this head is. Therefore, the rim is rebated. And it's actually pretty cool to have the same exact head as other popular cartridges. So, but in order to do that, they had to rebate the rim. So just be aware, this is the first cartridge with a rebated rim. And once again, the point behind the 284 was to have a shorter, fatter case, get similar case capacity and performance as a longer case 270 or 280, which in reality makes this, not this one in particular, but the original 284, the first short mag ever. So thank you for watching this video. Once again, cool factor, 10 out of 10, awesome cartridge. But it is a reloaded cartridge, so just keep that in mind. Hope you've enjoyed this. I just wanted to talk about one of my personal favorite cartridges of all time, the awesome 6.5-284 Norma. Take care.